Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The recitation is from Gauri Mahalla Pehla. Jato jaye, kaha te aave, keh upajay, keh jaye samave. Kyo badyo, kyo mukti paave, kyo abhanasi, sahaj samave. We will try to go verse by verse. Jato jaye kaha te aave. We notice that in the first verse is a series of questions that are being posed, beginning with Jato jaye kaha te aave. How to know Jato jaye, where it comes from. So the question is, what is this it that is being referred to? As we go down the passage into the other verses, it will become apparent that the it, kaha te aave, that is being referred to is really the self, the mind, if you will, the desire, all being used synonymously here. In effect, you could ask the question, where do I come from? How do I know where I come from? Keh upajay, keh jaye samave. How does one come into existence? And how then one disappear into non-existence? Kyo badyo, kyo mukti pave. What is it that causes me to be in bondage? And what can I do to release myself? Kyo mukti pave. Kyo abhanasi, sahaj samave. How do I return to that state of absolute freedom, into the indestructible abhinasi, where I'm in a state of equanimity? In other words, how do I return to my original state? So there is this implied in this question that there is a primal state out of which we have come into existence, and we are now experiencing this cycle. How do we get back? In the rahau, or the pause that follows, Guruji says, Naam hriday amrit mukh naam, narhar naam, narhar neh kaam, rahau. Naam hriday. Naam, as we have seen all along, for ease of understanding, even though the word naam has a very broad explanation, we are using naam primarily to denote self-knowledge, understanding of the self, of one's authentic nature. So bear that in mind. Naam hriday. When that self-knowledge awakens in one's hriday, heart, which is the deepest core of one's psychic existence. Naam hriday, amrit mukh naam. Amrit also here is being used as a synonym for naam, because this knowledge is the knowledge of immortality, and the self is immortal. It does not die, is not born. Amrit mukh naam. So that same self-knowledge not only should awaken within the heart, but it must also mukh naam. Mukh literally means the mouth or the face, but here is a metaphor for the mind, for the intellect. It should illuminate the mind and should awaken within the heart. Then what happens is Narhar Naam, Narhar Neh Kaam. Narhar, half lion, half human. This is a metaphor for the self, supreme self, that is commonly used within the Indian systems. And there is a mythology behind it, which we will not go into, but suffice to say that it indicates the Almighty, the Supreme Being. Narhar Naam, Narhar Nehkam. So self-knowledge gives us insight into the Supreme Self, and thereby we become free like the Self. That is our natural state. So what we require is self-knowledge to break through this bondage. And now the answers specifically to the questions that were raised. It says, Sahje Aavai, Sahje Jaye, Man te upaje, Man mahe samaye. Sahje, it arises spontaneously, and it disappears spontaneously. Sahje has many applications within Gurbani. It refers to the ultimate state that we are all aspiring to, a state of natural ease, a state of equanimity, equipoise, if you will. But the word literally means that which is born with, innate, that which is innate to us. So here it says, Sahje Aavai, Sahje Jaye. So it is innate to the self. And so therefore it arises spontaneously with the mind. Man te upaje. Man te upaje, man mahe samaye can be read in multiple ways. Man can also refer to the fact that this world arises and dissolves out of the Creator, Man. But it would be more adequate to think of this as the mind. Gurmukh mukto band na paye. The Gurmukh, again, could be used for an individual mind, but also to the process of being Guru-facing. In other words, a mind that is attuned to the Gur, the enlightener. Gurmukh mukto. So by becoming Guru-facing, Guru-guided, one finds release. Mukto, bandhana pai, breaks that bondage. Sabad bichari, chute haranai. It is through reflection of the discourse of the enlightener. Sabad also means written testimony. It also means the unstruck sound. It is a broad continuum. So the discourse of the Guru, reflection on the discourse of the Guru, chutta, brings that release. Haranai, self-knowledge, is the result. And then here in the next verse is an explanation of the self by using the analogy of birds. Tarvar pankhi baho nisabas, sukh dukhiya mane moh vinas. So tarvar, a tree, pankhi, bird, pankhi baho, many birds, nisabas, they come to perch atop a tree to rest for the night. Nisabas. Sukh dukhiya man moh vinas. And they spend the night. Vinas, they consume the night. Sukh dukhiya man moh, depending on their attachments, depending on their structure, if you will. And then Saj bihag takke akas. Saj bihag, Saj is evening, when the night turns into dawn. They then look at the sky. Deh disitave karam likhas. Depending on their karam, For birds, it would be depending on their inbuilt structure. They fly in 10 different directions. Now, this is an analogy for the self. So the self, the individual mind, comes into existence and spends the night of life. In Gurmat, life has been likened to the night. They come to rest on the tree of life. And during that stay, sensory attachments bring the self enjoyment, but also bring distress and sorrow. Sukha dukhiya man moh vinas. And likewise, like the birds fly off, when the night of life passes, the self returns to the unbounded, non-seeable domain. So the question is, what is causing the self to be caught in this trap? And that is hinted at in the 4th verse. Naam sanjogi goel thought, Kaam krodh fute bikhamart. What is happening is, Naam sanjogi goel thought. Goel thought actually is a reference to this world as a grazing ground where you bring cows to graze on. So this is a special place, attractive, that has been created out of Naam, because Naam is also the creator. So within Naam is Goel thought. And there the self gets distracted in Kaam, Krodh, Fute, Bikhamart. It wastes, expends its energy in anger, in desire. And that's what causes it to become trapped. Because when you pursue desire, egoic activity, the law is, the nature is that you have to then experience it. Hence, the stress in this passage to become non-attached to the outcome of your actions, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Another way of explaining this line, Naam Sanjogi Goel Thought, which we have used, is that the ones that are self-realized understand that the world is like a grazing ground. In other words, I'm here temporarily. I'm here to experience, but not to get attached to that experience. Bin vakhar suno ghar heart. So without self-realization, suno, ghar heart, the body, mind, being referred to as a house and a shop. The shop closes down empty. Gur mil khole bajar kapat. It is only through Gur guidance that the hard door, bajar kapat, the difficult to open door, opens. In other words, if you recall, in the previous passages, there is this mention of the dasam dwar within the body-mind complex. It is behind that, so to speak, that the self, the essence of a person is. But it is shut hard because of the ego. So here is that reference. Without self-knowledge, without knowledge, without the key, you cannot open that door. So what happens is, time runs out and the shutters come down. Nothing is gained. And in the end, Guruji is always emphasizes the meeting with a guru, with a sadh, with an accomplished one. Sadh mile purab sanjog. Purab sanjog through some predestiny. In other words, If you're motivated enough, you create your destiny. You have to have that motivation to even create the circumstance for meeting it. It just doesn't happen by itself. So Purab Sanjog, the way that one would read this, is not that if the desire of the Creator so happens to be that I'll be picked. That has an element of fatality in it. We want to take a more optimistic view of things. If you create enough desire to want self-knowledge, then you are creating that Purab Sanjog. You are creating that connection. That connection will happen. Intent matters. So when you are so destined, Guruji says, in other words, if you're so motivated, then you will meet the Sadh. The teacher will appear when the student is ready. Sach rehse pure har log. Pure, fullness, a fullness, richness will come into your existence when har log, when you become one with the har self. Mantan de leh sehaj subai. Surrender yourself. Surrender the ego. That's the way to realize the self. And then it is said subai, then it is spontaneous. Nanak tin ke lago pai. So Guruji says, I am beholden to the one who actually surrenders his ego to the self. So we see that some very perennial and fundamental questions have been raised. Where do I come from? Who am I? Why am I bound here? How do I release myself? And the answers are, really, you are the one who is perpetuating your cycle simply by being attached to the outcome of your actions. Become nehkam, as it says in the Rahautuk. That's the reflection for us to think about it, because attachment to actions imply that you have to then experience. If you are a karta, then you have to be a bhukta as well. And that's the cycle. So when you have the sense of main karta, then main bhukta will follow. It's as simple as that. So the key is, how do you unhitch this? And we will see in Gurbani that once you understand the nature of the self, you begin to realize that you are really an instrument. You're a slave, as Guruji says. Mul kharidi lalla gola. You're a slave to a bigger cause. You're here for the welfare of humanity, not for self-consumption. That really is the key, and something to reflect on. With those thoughts, until the next time, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.